Picture two versions of your life. In one, it's a random Tuesday morning. Your alarm goes off. You hit snooze. You check your phone. Emails are already waiting. Messages you don't care about. Tasks you didn't choose. You get up anyway, because you have to. The day is already decided for you. In the other version, you wake up at the same time, but nothing is pulling you. No urgency, no obligation. You still choose to work, maybe even harder than before, but it's different. You decide what matters. You decide when to start. You decide when to stop. Same person, same intelligence, same 24 hours. Completely different life. This isn't about money, it's about control. And most people never realize that. They think financial freedom is about having millions in the bank, about escaping work forever, about some distant finish line where life finally begins. It's not. Financial freedom is the moment your life stops being dictated by necessity and starts being directed by choice. That's the real goal. And once you understand that, everything else starts to look very different. Because the reason you feel stuck right now isn't that the path is complicated. It's that you've been aiming at the wrong target. You've been told to save more, invest consistently, wait decades, and eventually, maybe, you'll be free. But deep down, something about that never felt right. You did the math, you saw the timelines, and it didn't feel like a plan. It felt like a sentence. So you hesitate, you delay, you consume more information, hoping clarity will fix the discomfort. But the discomfort isn't coming from confusion, it's coming from misalignment. You're trying to follow a path that doesn't match what you actually want, because most people don't want to stop working. They want to stop being forced to work. That's a completely different problem. And once you see that, the strategy simplifies. Not easier, but clearer. The first shift is internal. Before numbers, before strategies, before side hustles or investments, there's a quieter problem most people never address. They don't actually believe this is possible for them. Not really. They'll say they want freedom. They'll watch videos like this. They'll even start, briefly. But underneath it all, there's a voice that keeps whispering, "People like me don't get that kind of life." And that voice quietly sabotages everything. Because if you don't believe something is achievable, you won't persist long enough to make it real. You'll test it. You won't commit to it.
So the question becomes, how do you build belief without evidence? You borrow it. Not from billionaires or viral success stories, from ordinary people who made it work. The teacher who built a small online business on weekends, the employee who paid off their expenses and replaced their income within a decade, the freelancer who turned a single skill into something scalable. When you expose yourself to enough of these stories, something shifts. What once looked like luck starts to look like a pattern. And once your brain sees a pattern, it stops resisting. It starts looking for ways to replicate it. That's when belief becomes functional. But belief alone doesn't carry you very far. Because at some point, you're going to be tired, you're going to be tempted, you're going to question whether any of this is worth it. And in that moment, vague goals won't save you. Financial freedom is too abstract. You need something sharper, something specific enough to feel. Maybe it's missing time with your family. Maybe it's the quiet dread of doing the same job for the next 30 years. Maybe it's knowing you have ideas, energy, potential, and nowhere to direct it. Whatever it is, it has to matter more than comfort, because the path requires trade-offs, not forever, but long enough. And without a clear reason, those trade-offs feel pointless. With a clear reason, they feel like progress. Now we can talk about the numbers. And this is where most people get it wrong. They think freedom requires a massive amount of money, a number so large it becomes discouraging before they even begin. But that assumption is built on a flawed premise. It assumes the goal is to never work again. But if you remove that assumption, the math changes immediately. Instead of asking, how much do I need to retire forever, ask a better question. What does it actually cost to run my life? Not your ideal life, not your upgraded lifestyle, your baseline. Housing, food, transportation, essentials. The number that keeps you stable. For most people, it's far lower than they expect. And once you know that number, something powerful happens. The goal becomes tangible. because now you're not chasing millions, you're solving a simpler equation.
How do I generate this amount without relying on a job? That's a very different game. And this is where leverage comes in. Every dollar you remove from your monthly expenses reduces the size of the problem, not symbolically, mathematically. If your life costs $8,000 a month, you need to build income that replaces $8,000. If it costs $4,000, you've just cut the challenge in half. That's not sacrifice, that's strategy. And the biggest lever, by far, is housing. Most people build their entire financial life around an expense that quietly controls everything. They upgrade too early. They stretch too far. They lock themselves into a cost structure that requires constant effort just to maintain. But if you reverse that decision, if you reduce or eliminate your biggest expense, the entire system changes. Suddenly, time opens up, options expand, pressure decreases. The same principle applies to everything else: cars, food, lifestyle inflation. Individually, they seem small. Combined, they define your trajectory. Now here's where the real shift happens. Your job is not your escape plan. It's your funding source. Most people expect their job to eventually deliver freedom. It won't. It was never designed to. A job is a trade. Time for money. Linear, predictable, limited. No matter how hard you push it, there's a ceiling. Which means if your entire plan depends on your salary, your entire plan is capped. But your job still matters because it buys you something far more valuable than money. It buys you time to build something else. And that something else is where freedom actually comes from. There are only two types of income: the kind that stops when you stop, and the kind that continues after the work is done. Most people live entirely in the first category. They work, they get paid, they stop, the money stops. Even their side hustles follow the same pattern: more hours, more income; fewer hours, less income. It feels productive, but it doesn't scale. The second type is different. It requires more effort up front, often with no immediate reward. But once it starts working, it changes everything. You create something once, and it continues to produce a piece of content, a digital product, a system, a skill that allows you to charge based on results, not time. At first, it feels inefficient, slow, uncertain, but over time, it compounds, and eventually, it separates. This is the difference between building a ceiling and removing one. And here's what most people misunderstand. You don't need a massive business. You don't need to go viral. You don't need to build an empire. You need something that works, something that generates consistent income without constant input, even if it starts small. Because once your baseline is covered, everything else becomes optional. That's the moment things shift. Not when you have millions, but when you no longer have to say yes to things you don't want. Now, there's a question that quietly sits underneath all of this. What if I don't know what to build? And that question stops more people than anything else. They wait for clarity. They search for the perfect idea. They analyze every option. And they never start. But clarity doesn't come from thinking. It comes from doing. The first attempt is almost never the right one. And it's not supposed to be. It's supposed to teach you what you enjoy, what you're good at, what people actually value. Every iteration gets you closer, but only if you begin. The second obstacle is selling. People don't like it. It feels uncomfortable, unnatural. But at its core, selling is simple. It's solving a problem and communicating that solution clearly. You don't need a massive audience. You don't need to be an expert. You need to be useful to someone who knows less than you. That's enough to start. And the third obstacle is time, or at least the perception of it, because most people don't lack time, they lack intention. Hours disappear into passive consumption, scrolling, watching, waiting. But if you redirect even a small portion of that time consistently, it compounds. 1 hour a day doesn't feel like much until you realize it's 365 hours a year. That's enough to build something real, not overnight, but inevitably.
And this brings us to something most people avoid. There is no version of this path without discomfort. You can compress it or you can stretch it, but you can't remove it. Some people choose intensity. They reduce expenses aggressively, they build relentlessly, they move fast, and they reach freedom sooner. Others choose balance, slower progress, more comfort along the way. Both paths work, but what doesn't work is trying to avoid trade-offs entirely. Comfort now always delays freedom later. Always. So the question isn't, is this hard? The question is, which version of hard are you choosing? Because either way, you're paying. Time, energy, opportunity. The difference is whether that cost leads somewhere or keeps you in place. Along the way, things will fail. Ideas won't work, efforts won't pay off immediately. That's not a sign to stop. That's the process working. Because every attempt builds skill, every mistake builds awareness, and over time, those invisible gains become visible results, but only for the people who stay in the game long enough to. And that's really what separates those who make it from those who don't. Not intelligence, not talent, endurance, the willingness to keep going when nothing is happening yet, to trust the process before it pays you back, because eventually it does. And when it does, it doesn't look dramatic. There's no single moment where everything changes. It's quieter than that, more subtler. You wake up one day and realize you have options. You're not trapped. You're not dependent. You're not negotiating your life from a position of pressure. You're choosing. And that's the whole point. Not to escape work, but to escape obligation. Not to do nothing, but to finally decide what's worth doing. The path isn't hidden. It's not reserved for a specific type of person. It's just uncommon. Because it requires a different way of thinking, a different way of living, and a different level of consistency than most people are willing to maintain. But if you've made it this far, you already see it. You understand the gap. It's not information, it's action. So don't try to change everything at once. Pick one shift, lower one expense, start one skill, build one stream, just one. Do it today, then repeat tomorrow, because a year from now, the difference between staying the same and moving forward won't be what you knew, it will be what you did, and that's the only variable that ever mattered.